Thanks to the backlash against World War I era policies, the Republican Party entered an age of dominance in the 1920s. The Republican presidential nominee, Warren G. Harding, had won the 1920 presidential election in a landslide victory. The GOP picked up 67 seats in the House and 10 seats in the Senate. The Republicans won 302 of the 435 seats in the House of Representatives and 59 of the 96 seats in the Senate. The GOP had both a supermajority in the House and a firm control of the Senate. And in addition to the presidency, they seemed unstoppable. But in less than 2 years' time, the Republican Party was on the verge of losing that majority. While the GOP would manage to cling on barely in the House and Senate, a Democratic surge threatened to upend this era of dominance. What were the causes of this reversal of fortune, and what were the consequences for the Harding administration? Let's take a look back at the 1922 midterms to find out. While the Harding administration saw many achievements, it also suffered several setbacks in its first 2 years of office. The 67th Congress passed and Harding signed into law a series of economic measures intended to alleviate the effects of the 1920-21 recession. Harding slashed income taxes and raised rates on manufactured imports. 2 months before the midterms, the Forney-McCumber tariff was signed into law, which raised tariffs to the highest point they had ever been in U.S. history. By the midterms, the economy began to show signs of recovery. However, unemployment would not reach pre-recession levels until 1923. This would remain a consistent problem for the GOP going into the elections. The first 2 years of the Harding administration also saw the rise of industrial disputes, the worst of which came on July 1st, 1922, when 6 of the 16 railroad unions went on strike. The dispute began in the aftermath of the re-privatization of the railroads, which were nationalized during the First World War. The railroad companies and the unions couldn't come to an agreement over wages and hiring out-of-shop workers. The Railroad Labor Board announced on July 3rd that unions had forfeited their right to arbitrate. Widespread violence soon followed. Attorney General Harry Doughty staunchly opposed the strike. He sent marshals to help aid the railroad owners, and a court-ordered injunction was ordered against the striking workers. The strike would end on September 1st. The long-term impact of the strike would be the severe lack of union voters needed to help Republicans win in the upcoming elections. Another controversy would be the issue of World War I bonuses for veterans. In 1919, Congress proposed a Veterans Bonus Bill. Republicans who controlled the House and Senate even then supported the bill very much, thanks to the strong support from the veterans lobby. In order to keep the party together, Harding agreed to support a bonus package if only Congress agreed to pass a national sales tax to fund it. The Republican Party was having none of it, so in 1922, Congress did pass a bonus bill. Harding vetoed it. A 4-vote deficit in the Senate failed to override the veto. While Harding managed to win over the press, the voting population itself was not pleased, and there was a strong backlash from veterans and their family members towards the Republican Party. The ethnic vote once again became a factor as well. The Irish-American population had become very angry with the Wilson administration for aiding Great Britain, and the German community resented the Wilson administration for declaring war on the old country. These factors, coupled with Wilson's support for immigration restrictions, isolated the traditionally democratic Irish and German American communities. They in turn sat out the 1929 election. They came home to the Democratic Party in 1922 thanks to the continued strife in the big cities and annoyance over the prohibition of alcohol. The Republican-aligned Chicago Tribune projected that the GOP would lose 25 to 30 seats. The results would be much worse. Believing that there was no real difference between the Democratic and Republican parties, the last remnants of the progressive movements relaunched the Farmer Labor Party, which was mostly active at this point in Minnesota and in Wisconsin. Going into the election, the Republican leader in the House of Representatives was Frederick Gillett of the Massachusetts 2nd District. The Democrats in the House were led by Finis Garrett of the Tennessee 9th District. The day before the election, the Republicans held 302 seats to the Democrats' 131 seats. All 435 seats were up for grabs in this election, with 218 seats needed to win a majority. In the Senate, the unofficial leader of the Republican Party was Henry Cabot Lodge, a historian and statesman from Massachusetts. The Democrats in the Senate were led by Oscar Underwood from Alabama. The Republicans had 60 seats in the Senate, while the Democrats had 36. In this election, 32 of the 96 seats in the Senate were up for grabs, and 49 seats were needed to win a majority. In the final result, the Republicans lost 77 seats. This reduced their share of the seats to 225 seats. The Democrats gained 76 seats and won 207 seats in total. The Farmer Labor Party gained 2 seats from having 0 previously, and the only socialist in Congress maintained his sole seat. The Republicans managed to hold on to their majority in the House, but only by a slight margin. The GOP also maintained a majority in the popular vote with 10,585,391 votes to the Democrats' 9,112,202 votes. The Farmer Labor Party won 126,989 votes. In the Senate, the Republicans also didn't fare well at all. Of the 32 seats in contention, the GOP lost a net 7 seats, and the Democrats gained a net 6 seats. The Farmer Labor Party won 1 seat. Despite their defeats, the Republicans maintained a slight advantage in the Senate, controlling 53 of the 96 seats. Breaking it down demographically and geographically, the House and Senate elections was returned to the status quo of the pre-war period. The Democrats continued to hold on to their traditional base of support, the deep, solid blue Democratic South. They also managed to regain votes in the Upper South, places like in Virginia and in Tennessee and in Missouri went deep blue in this election. Democrats also made significant inroads back into another traditional base of support, that being of the major cities, including New York and in Chicago. The return of the Irish and German Americans into the refold of the Democratic Party would be crucial for the party to regain relevance. Veterans and their family members also became angered over the administration's failure to pass a sufficient relief bill to address their needs. The Republicans, meanwhile, maintained the slim majority that they had, thanks to maintain the support of the more affluent northeastern and upper Midwestern districts. Republicans would continue to maintain control of Philadelphia as well as the Main Line area, as well as the affluent areas of Boston. Apart from the House and Senate elections, Democrats won several gubernatorial elections. And I make this distinction because it highlights how much the ethnic vote mattered in this election and how it would prove to be crucial in future elections. In the 1922 New York gubernatorial election, Al Smith won a second term to be the non-consecutive governor of New York. He won in a landslide victory of 55.22% of the vote. He won thanks to, in large part, by gaining enough voters in the big cities, especially, of course, New York City and the boroughs. Smith was Catholic. He was Irish and a longtime opponent of prohibitionism, which was becoming a severe drain on law enforcement agencies as illegal smugglers began to pour booze into the cities and caused mayhem and crime wherever they went. Smith managed to build a coalition using the city machines as they were and getting the ethnic vote out to support him. In a way, this truly was the beginning of what has been called a proto-New Deal coalition and would rise to national prominence and secure a democratic 20th century, beginning a decade after this in 1932. But back to this most current election. While the GOP managed to keep control of both chambers of the House, this proved to be a disaster for the Harding administration, which was already rocked by scandals. This reinvigorated the progressive wing of the Republican Party, led by Wisconsin Senator Robert La Follette, who more aggressively pushed to investigate the administration. Luckily, the Harding administration wouldn't have to worry about this too severely, because Harding died in 1923. And despite their severe setbacks, the GOP would manage to make the 1920s truly their decade and would not end until the 1930 midterm election.